Okay, we want to talk about the main tab bar in Vizrt Artist, and this is the main tab bar that runs across the very top of Vizrt Artist. In this video, we are using Vizrt Artist 3.14. You may be using a different version, but depending on the version, it's all going to very much be the same with some very slight variations. So you can use this video and apply it to all your versions of Vizrt Artist that you are using. So let's jump in. The main tab bar, as I mentioned, is this main tab bar that runs along the top of our software here. And our first tab here is server. And when we click on server, the first thing you'll notice, at least in mine, is a bunch of folders and projects over here. Now we have a project which stands for P, and these are these blue folders. If I open this up, or any of these blue folders up, we also have orange folders, which stands for folders, and it's a way to organize our assets. So the server is basically allowing us to access our graphic hub server. And this is how we get to it within Vizrt Artist. And here you can see within the server, we also have additional tabs. And our first tab here is S, and it's a scene. So all of these thumbnails that I see within these folders, if I come and click into different folders, it's all going to give us thumbnails of the different scenes that we have created already. And you can easily just double click on a scene to load it up to see what it is. And that's what the scenes or S tab is within our server. We also have a G tab, which stands for groups, and these are groups that we have created, or 3D objects that we have created within Vizrt. So here's a group, and I can tell it's a group because I can right click on it and I can say split container, and then I can, for instance, if I wanted to create a group, here you see I have a bunch of containers, and I could just come up here and right click, and I could say merge container, and I could drag that right up into our group here and save it, and that's what the groups or the G tab is. We also have materials, so if we click on our M tab here, this is where we can apply materials to anything. And if we needed to create a new material, we could just right click on here and create a new material like this and give it a name, and we'll hit enter, and here would be our new material. You double click on it, give it a color, save it, close it, and there it is. We also have materials advanced, which is a combination of a material and an image. So if I come down here and drag it onto our little object, we can come in here and say split material advanced, and when I do that, you can see that it's a material and this reflective color here that we've combined into one that we can use on our objects. Now our image tab up here obviously shows all of our textures that we can use within our scenes, and you can easily import them by using the import tab over here. We also have an F tab for fonts, so this is where all of our fonts will reside, and again it will correspond to the folders on the left hand side here. If you need to know anything about fonts, then you can watch our font tutorials and or how to import fonts within Vizrt. We also have an audio or an A button here, which stands for audio, so you can import audio clips. You also have a V for video, and we also have a substance here that we can use within this tab for substances. Now let's move over to our other tab at the top here. It's called built-ins. Within the built-ins is where we will find all of our built-ins tools to use within Vizrt. And again, we have different tabs in here. So we have our built-ins, we have geometry plugins here. That means we can drag each one of these objects or plugins down into our scene and use them to build a scene. We also have folders over here, which will also correspond to additional geometry plugins that we can use. Besides the plugins, we also have container plugins here that we can use, and these are plugins that will help you achieve certain design results within your scene. So we could, again, correspond these to different folders here on the left, and there's a lot of different plugins here that you could use. So if you need help finding out what any of these do, you can watch our videos on each one of these. There's also a shaders tab, which allows us to use the shaders within our scenes, and again we have our folders here that we can click through. We also have our scene plugins within our built-ins folder, and again you can check out how to use all of these. And we also have our media assets within our built-ins too. Our control tab here at the very top allows us to do some additional functionality as far as using our plugins, such as our control plugins. So if we came over here and used some of these plugins within our control, we would start seeing them up within our control window here. And this control window helps us writing external programs because it gives us names of certain objects. The next tab up here is Views, and Views creates additional views or camera views of our render window. And if we came over into our render window, we could click on this little numeric icon here, and it gives us different options to select through our camera here. So we could do this for each view now that we are in the views. So we have a front, and we have 16 different cameras that we can use. We also have a left, a top, bottom, right, and back. So the views allow us to create and or see our scene in different views, which is very helpful in the 3D environment. Now we also have a tree. So the tree is really an extended version of this lower left window, and if we click on the tree here, it's just going to expand that window, and that's very helpful because, believe it or not, sometimes you'll have scenes that are so big that all of your groups contain this whole window here, and you'll need the option or the extra room to actually see all of that stuff. So it's good that you can expand it in some cases, and you may need to. Our next tab here is the stage, and the stage, again, we have a whole video on this as well, but this is our render or our animation, and it allows us to create keyframes here. So to demonstrate this very quick, we'll just jump back and grab an object, and if we were to create a keyframe right here and we go into this stage, you can see that we now have something in here. So the stage allows us to access our keyframes and our animations and edit and or manipulate it in that way. And again, there's a video on that as well. Server stage shows us the stage along with our server. Another tab up here is server, stage, plus tree. So it's showing us our stage, our server, and our tree. So we can have all three of these windows open while we are working within our scene. Let's jump over here to the right hand side where we have the import button. And the import button allows us to import anything that we need to get into Vizrt, and that includes fonts, images, 3D objects, other scenes from Vizrt. We have audio clips, also substances, and other archives from Vizrt scenes as well that we would be allowed to import. Again, if you need to know how to import anything, we have videos on that as well. The next one over here is archive. So if we needed to actually archive a scene or save off anything that we wanted to save, we could drag our scene and or images or anything from the server that we wanted to export. We could do that through this archive button. Our next tab here is config, and this is kind of the behind the scenes doings of your Vizrt Artist. So there may be some things that you need to set up here. For instance, we have our render options here when we click in here, and it gives us our different options to be able to render. We also have font and text options here, clock formats, scene default values. So there's a lot of different things that you can place or set up within your configuration tab. And if you're doing anything like Virtual Studio and or green screen, then you can use these settings in here to really match up on what you're doing within your broadcast. Again, we have a whole other video to cover this. So up here, our next button is called the post button, and this post will allow us to render out our Vizrt scenes to a QuickTime format, a JPEG sequence, a TIFF sequence, a Windows movie, whatever we need. We can render our scenes out to a movie file if we needed to manipulate it or render it or do anything else or just export it. This will allow us to do it here. Again, we have a whole video on this to show you how to do that. We have an on-air button, and you notice when I click on that, it just turns that lower right render window into an on-air engine, and now our render window is full screen. And to get out of on-air mode, you just click on-air. Now we have a couple of smaller buttons over here to the far right, and we have a little question mark icon here, and this will allow us to open the Vizrt documentation. So we click on that, and Included with every Vizrt Artist install is the documentation and other things that you can use within your design. To the right of that, we have a show messages box, and if we bring this up, we can type messages to the other Graphic Hub users. Depending how your system is set up, you may have other users on the network that you can chat and or leave notes to within this window. Next to that, we have a show commands window, and of course if we click on this, it brings up the show commands, and the show commands may look a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with what they are, but they can be very helpful for you as well. This is always running in the background, so if you want to get rid of it, you can just minimize it. And again, we have another video on what this is and how to use it. So we come over again, we have a show license information as well, that little I button, and then there is a little upside down triangle here, and that will just minimize the whole software. And then of course the X button here will close out the software. So being that this is the end of the video, that's what we're going to do. And if you need help with any of these tabs on the main tab bar here, check out the other videos that we have.